Hey scrappy friends, Bree here with a new video, and this video is video number 2 from the paper crafting capsule. And this is a pretty simple and easy card. We're cutting down some white cardstock. This is Whisper White from Stampin' Up, and we're cutting that down to 5¼ by 4. And we're just prepping our card base at this point and making an A2 card, which is a 5½ by 4¼ card base. Getting that nice and sealed with the bone folder there, making sure we have a nice, good score line. So now we're moving on, and I'm getting out these circles that are kind of like brush stroked circles from the Happy Celebration stamp set from Stampin' Up. We're going to use 3 different Stampin' Up ink colors to make a nice, fun circle background for our card base today. Zoom in for you there and make sure you guys can see it. It's off just a tiny bit, but hopefully it'll be a little better. Last time I forgot to zoom in, so try to remember that this time. All right, so the first color that we're using is Pretty Peacock. It's a beautiful blue color. It's super fun. This is one of my favorite Stampin' Up colors right now. And so I'm just stamping this circle, and this is the larger circle of the 2 that come in the stamp set. So I'm going to stamp the larger one, and then I'm also going to go back and stamp the smaller one as well. And I'm just kind of putting these in random spots. There's no really rhyme or reason on the way I'm stamping them or where I am stamping them. I just wanted to kind of fill it in and make a fun background. So now we're going to clean off those stamps, and we are going to move on to the next color. Next color is a really beautiful pink color. It's kind of like I feel like it's like a good mix between like mauve and pink. And so it is called Rococo Rose. And so I'm going to go through and add in some of those circles now. And you can see here, I'm just kind of filling in the white space, seeing where I feel like I need to balance the card out. Trying to find places to make it to where the colors aren't too on top of each other, but there's a nice mix in there. And this should be the last one with Rococo Rose. So now I'll clean off these stamps again, and we will move on to Grapefruit Grove. It is a kind of coral orangish color that is also a Stampin' Up ink. And we'll have a lot more of these circles because I really just wanted to fill in the space. So you'll kind of see me struggle with the placement here and trying to figure out where to put them. So we're finishing up with the big circle here and moving on to the smaller circle. And the smaller circle, I ended up going back after looking at it for a while, kind of trying to see where I wanted to add more circles. I ended up going over and overlapping a few of the other circles, and it kind of worked because this color is so light that it didn't take away from the other colors. So you can see here a few spots where I overlapped with other colors. I just wanted a full background, make sure nice and wasn't too much white space. So we are done with our stamping at this point. So I'm cleaning off the stamps and setting all the inks aside at this point. Cleaning up our area. I got out the Shimmer Mist. This one is called Sweetheart, and it matches that Rococo Rose so well. And so I wanted to splatter this into the background. So I start off and I try using the nozzle. It was not working the way I wanted it to. So I definitely put in a lot of work trying, but it just wasn't turning out. I wanted a lot more splatters. So I'll keep trying for a little bit longer, and then eventually I move on to a paintbrush and I dip my paintbrush into the mist and then use it to really splatter the background. And this is where I bring in the paintbrush and it just works so much better. Definitely got a lot more of that color splatter in the background like I wanted. So I'm just showing the background to you guys here. I love the way this turned out. And so now I'm just going to, you can see I got some on my card base. So I ended up having to do a different card base later in the video. But just cleaning up my area at this point, wiping off the stamp pads. The splatters kind of got everywhere. So cleaning up, making sure we don't have any more of that ink laying around so that it doesn't get on anything else. Now we are at the stage where we are moving on to the sentiment. So I get out some basic black Stampin' Up! Cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss my sentiment with white embossing powder. So I pick out the happy that also looks like brush strokes, and I'm going to go ahead and get out my Stamparatus at this time. If you don't know what a Stamparatus is, it is very much like the Misty. And so this is really great when you're wanting to do heat embossing because you're able to stamp it over and over again in the same spot if you need to. So I get this all set up in the bottom of the paper, kind of making sure I have enough space and have it nice and lined up at the bottom so that way I can add in my entire sentiment before cutting this down. And now I'm I'm prepping the area with a anti-static tool. This is an eCase Success powder tool, and this works great to make sure that the embossing powder doesn't stick anywhere you don't want it to stick. And I have the Versamark ink pad from Stampin' Up, and I'm using that to ink up my happy sentiment. And swing the door over here and then add a lot of pressure, making sure I have a nice impression. And that turned out great. I only had to stamp it once. So now getting out my white embossing powder from Stampin' Up! Again, and adding this powder all over the sentiment, making sure we have a nice full coverage. And once you kind of get done, you'll see I made a big mess there. I still had some on my little spatula that I've tossed everywhere. So once I have a nice solid coat on that, then I have my heating tool already heating up at this point. And so I use this. This is a pretty big sentiment, so I knew it was going to take a little while for this to melt. So I wanted it heated up, and that way it can make it go a little faster. You'll see here, just trying to clean up the area so that powder didn't melt onto my mat, even though it's already filthy. And trying to melt this and get a nice solid shiny white smooth texture to that sentiment. I like to do both sides of the paper, that way it doesn't warp the paper. Not everybody does it that way. I just find it to be best. Oftentimes the heat can really warp the paper. And now I'm just getting out the second part of the sentiment that says birthday to you. And we're going to ink that up and heat emboss it as well. So getting out our Misty, cleaning off that happy stamp, and getting this all set up so that we are able to move on to that second part of the sentiment and get it done. And we go ahead and put that happy part back in, and I line up the sentiment, the second part of the sentiment underneath the happy, trying to center it. I had a little bit of a hard time. It curved when I turned over the door. I don't know why, but the stamp did not want to stick correctly. So I'm kind of messing with it here, trying to make sure I have a nice straight sentiment so it's not curved or messed up in any way. So now I'm adding that powder again, making sure we don't have any excess powder, embossing powder that gets stuck. Inking that up in Versamark ink, swinging the door over, adding some pressure, and that turned out really great. That sentiment stamped really well. So now we are cleaning off that stamp, setting it aside, and we are done with the Stampin' Majig. And so now we're going to add some embossing powder. We have our heat gun going, and we will get the second part coated and heat embossed for us. Use my paintbrush to kind of clean off my mat there this time. I had embossing powder everywhere, so cleaned it up as much as I could. And now we're ready to heat set this. This one definitely did not take as long as the Happy, which was nice. Once I have this nice and melted into a smooth white kind of like gel look, I'm going to cut this down, and I didn't really have a size in mind. I just knew that I wanted it to have just a very thin black like edge around the sentiment. Sorry, words lost me there. So I'm just cutting this down, making sure I have that really thin edge, and we will set that aside. After, actually, we do wipe off the powder, the excess powder. Once you've let the embossing powder dry really well, it's always good to then take just a damp rag or something and wipe off that excess static powder so that you don't have it still sitting on the back. So here I am folding over another card base since we messed up the other one, and I think at this point I was ready to put the card together, and then I remembered that I missed a step. So I get out the Lawn Fawn. They are the just stitched framelits, and they are hearts. And so I took apart the framelits, and the first time using them, and I used the two smaller hearts, and I filled the background with hearts, and I love the way this turned out. See there, such a fun texture. So I love those die cuts. They just give a nice impression into this like background. They don't actually cut, so it's super fun. So here I'm just adding on some double-sided foam tape and putting that all over the background layer of the card. Getting all those pieces removed, the backings, and now laying down that background. I love the way this background turned out. It's so fun. This capsule challenge has been so fun. It's really made my creativity, like me, really step out of the box and do creativity. So this is the finished card for today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you guys enjoy the video. I'll see you all next time. Bye.